This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, everybody? Ricky Widmer here, along with @the Mark Weber.
WME.
See, I decided to do that now. I was watching Kind of Funny, actually, who both me and you know, and Greg Miller goes @Tim Geddes, and I'm like, instead of saying the Mark Weber, why not just say @the Mark Weber since it's your Twitter handle?
And then on Rick and Johnny, you can say @War Machine, whatever the last number is. Instead of Johnny.
Yeah, I don't say it. You're the only Twitter handle that I say. But welcome into another edition of the Onside Kick right here on Most Valuable Podcast, your one-stop shop for everything in the NFL realm of things. For here at MVP, got a jam-packed show for you guys. Going to have Patrick on here to start talking about the Chicago Bears, and then we're going to continue our fantasy football rankings. You missed wide receivers last week, Mark, although you did give your rankings.
Yep.
And this week we're doing tight ends, so the top 30 tight ends we'll dive into. But before we get into everything, a little bit of housekeeping here at the beginning. Number one, if you want to support us, want to be on a podcast like Pat is today, make sure to check out patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. Also, if you want yourself an MVP t-shirt, head to look over. Didn't remember if Mark wore his. That shirt, that store link is down below in the description. You can also get that at mostvaluablepodcast.com along with everything for MVP each and every day. And last but not least, if you are on Apple Podcasts, you're on iTunes, make sure to give the Onside Kick and all the podcasts as MVP a nice 5-star rating and type in a little bit of why you like us or why you like checking out the podcast. But we're starting off today with the Chicago Bears. Patrick's a Bears fan. Mark's a Bears fan. The Outcast, check out them. They're Bears fans talking about Bears each and every week. And I like the topic that Patrick brought up for us today. It's basically, are we overhyping the Chicago Bears? There's a lot of hype with Matt Nagy coming in, Mitch Trubisky in year 2. You draft Roquan Smith. Everyone's excited about that. So, Patrick, I'm going to throw it off to you right away, right at the top. Are we overhyping the Chicago Bears?
I think we are overhyping the Bears this offseason because they did address a lot of needs, and they did address a lot of the things that they said they were going to do. They said they were going to build around Mitch Trubisky, and they've done that. My issue is now that we've brought in all these guys to help Mitch Trubisky out, a lot of people are saying the Bears had the best offseason of the NFL. They're going to be LA Rams 2.0 after the Rams won 11 games last year after what they did to build around Jared Goff. And I'm a little more pessimistic about the Bears' chances to do that right after this offseason because I still think there's a ton of question marks around the Bears and the guys that they brought in. Even though a lot of them do make a lot of sense and they can definitely help the Bears, we have yet to see them in the offense by Matt Nagy. So I'm not really sure that they can make that turnaround that the Rams did. And the fact that the Bears fans are like overhyping this team saying, oh, we're going to be so good this year, we might win 10 games, we might win 11 games, we might win the division. That part makes me think, like, okay, maybe we're overhyping this a little bit because we haven't seen these guys play yet for the Bears under this new system.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's always a lot of hype about the Chicago Bears. I mean, last year, even last year still, but last year there might have been a little bit less. But there's always hype about it. I know if you watch NFL Network's Good Morning Football, it was
the biggest Bears fans I know.
Yeah, right. You got Kay Adams from Chicago, and she's saying that they're the dark horse team for her to make it into the playoffs. And that's not an uncommon thing. It comes up every once in a while of being these teams that might make it. And the fact is, you got to remember that this is a team that was 5-11 last year. Mm-hmm. They've got a brand new coach. Brand new offensive coordinator. Fortunately, the defensive coordinator stuck. And there are a lot of good reasons to be hyped. And we're not going to ignore that this is actually, this was a top 10 defense last year. This is a team that has a lot of weapons. They went and they grabbed things. This is a team that got one of the hot young offensive coordinators to be the head coach. They got a lot of things going right. But yeah, I mean, you definitely are right that I think it's just the pump the brakes type of moment. I mean, this was I'm pretty sure, if I'm not wrong, that they were last, if not second to last, in just passing offense last year. And part of that's John Fox, but still, we're not going to have Mitch Trubisky just suddenly go out there and look for sure like Jared Goff or look like an Aaron Rodgers, just absolutely controlling that offense and dominating defenses out there. It takes time. I mean, there was a good quote today where I'm pretty sure it was Matt Nagy that was saying that Mitch is building his own library now within the offense. No, he's building it. It's not built. It's not done. It's not ready. On today that we're recording this on Tuesday, and this article I think came out
last week
that they're talking about this, and they were talking about last week there was a really bad day of practice, and even the offensive coordinator coming out and saying, yeah, this was a bad day. That's what the team has, and that's what the team's going to deal with through the season. They're going to have bad days. They're going to have good days. They're learning. They're building.
Well, and I mean, I think the big thing for me is that if you guys do not hire Matt Nagy and don't get rid of John Fox, we're not having this same hype. Like, if John Fox is still the head coach coming into this year, it's a low-light season for me. But because of, all right, we're getting Matt Nagy coming in, Mitch can now grow in year 2, you get Vic back for the defense, you get the Roquan Smith, the kind of infusion into that defense, there's a reason to be excited. Like, Bears fans, I don't expect Bears fans to just sit there and go, well, this will be another wasted season. Like, I don't know if there's any fan base besides maybe the Jets a little bit, not even them. Like, everyone this year, I feel like, has a little bit of excitement in their own way for their team. But here's the thing I'm thinking of. When Matt Nagy started in KC compared to Chicago, what are some of the differences? Yeah, the defense, I would say that the defense might be, like, this team is overall younger than the team that him and Andy Reid started with. 2013 is when Nagy started in KC. This team is younger than that KC team. Also, instead of a Mitch Trubisky, who is a year 2 quarterback, he was getting, it was Alex Smith's, or going to be Alex Smith's first year in KC, but Alex Smith was already a quarterback from 2005 to 2012 at that point. So he was a guy that, although his career in San Fran wasn't number 1 pick level, and he was getting replaced by Colin Kaepernick at that point, he still was getting a guy who, all right, this is a veteran who at least knows
who was
the
coming
league.
off of one of his best years.
Yeah, and I believe, didn't he get benched in one of that best year? Like, he got injured.
He got hurt and then replaced by Colin Kaepernick.
And then Kaepernick basically stole the job from him. So there's that. And then for me, I think there's also the thing I look at is the schedule. Like, Green Bay is going to be tough. You play them twice. Vikings are going to be tough. You play them twice. I mean, I know with the Vikings, you guys always really play us close in Chicago, and then in Minnesota, we usually win that. That's how I think it's been for the last at least 2 years. But then there's like Arizona could be tough this year, either with Sam Bradford or Josh Rosen week 3. The Patriots, that's a loss for me. Lions is a toss-up, and you get one of them on Thanksgiving. And then it's like the last 3 non-divisional games you guys play, the Giants should be better than last year. The Rams are a team that many people are saying are going to win the Super Bowl this year. And then you get San Fran at San Fran, which we don't know what Jimmy Garoppolo is going to do. But if last year was a little bit of a sample, 16-0, that's what they're going to do because Garoppolo don't lose. That's a joke, by the way. Don't take that seriously. But do you think the schedule at all, Pat, is what I'll ask you. Do you think the schedule should kind of bring Bears fans down to earth? Like, okay, we could see growth, but don't be surprised if we go 5-11 or 6-10 with this schedule this year.
I think it should definitely bring some Bears fans down because a lot of those teams beat the Bears last year. Like, they didn't beat anybody in their own division. They somehow win 4 games against the AFC North. However, they have a completely different set schedule this year where they have to play teams like New England. They have to play Tampa Bay, who beat us last year. They have to play Seattle, which we don't know what could happen in that game. We could win, they could win. That could be a toss-up. But I think the schedule should definitely do a good job of like helping ground Bears fans and also realize that with those games, there's going to be a lot of growing pains of the Bears learning that new offense and the defense continuing to get better, even with a lot of pass rush questions currently with the Bears. So there's going to be growing pains, and it's not going to be a smooth sailing right out of the gate.
And it's interesting with this, too, because those first 2 games are both primetime games.
Mm-hmm. And now the second game is Brandon Marshall's homecoming.
That's very true.
Oh,
That's very true. Although completely different teams. So, but anyways, it's interesting here because, there is a lot of hype that's being built. And, of course, the media are going to, have a bit of that, too, talking about Mitch Trubisky because it's exciting. Yes, he didn't look great in his rookie year, but there's still a lot of things that you're excited about.
I'm going to cut you off, and I'll ask both you and Pat this, is the Outcast, which go check it out. It'll be right above Mark's head, hopefully, if I did things right. What did you think of? They talked about like Mitch's comments from last week, where someone in the media asked him like the offense was behind the defense, and he kind of just, I guess, snapped a little bit and was like, "Well, who said that? Who said that we're behind?" And like showed a little fire, but got a little fiery and a little snappy with the media. Do you like that? Do you not like that from your starting quarterback?
Go ahead, Pat.
I don't mind it from my starting quarterback, to be honest. Like, I think that he's like very passionate about wanting his team to learn the offense and get better at it, because it's a new offense. It's a new, more complex scheme that they ran last year under Dow Loggains' predictable offense. And I think he takes a lot of pride in like, we're making progress. We're making a lot of progress. So when someone comes in like, oh, well, you guys are like miles behind the defense, like I can understand like getting a little chippy about that. Like he was like snappy about it, but he didn't like full on yell at him. So I didn't think of it as too much. I just think he was just very passionate, and he's been described as like a very passionate guy in the locker room. So that doesn't really truly surprise me about Mitch Trubisky, but it doesn't worry me, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it could be one of two things. I mean, the one thing is exactly that. I mean, he's just passionate. He's going to defend his team. You kind of want that out of a player. You want that out of a leader. The other thing is potentially it could have just been that it was spot on, and he, it was just a sensitive area for them to talk about, and that could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing because this is barely, this is still off season. This is not preseason yet, so none of anything that's really happening right now matters all that much. And I know that you build upon things and everything like that, and Tom Brady himself has talked year in, year out about how important OTAs are, but the thing that's here that we need to really worry about is just, are they learning? It doesn't matter if they have a bad day. It doesn't matter if and that's any team. It doesn't matter about that.
Almost like,
are you
also,
learning from your mistakes?
Does the win and losses not matter? Just as long as the team is making progressions each and every week.
Exactly.
Well, they don't matter yet, but soon they're going to matter once we actually get to the season. But right now, they don't matter.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting, too, for a team like the Chicago Bears that's pretty fresh, pretty new. There's a lot of new faces, a lot of new coaches, the new-ish quarterback, that as long as it's better than last year, as long as your passing game is not the worst in the NFL, as long as your defense continues to be good, as long as you can score points, would 6 wins be better than 5? Yes, that would be great. Is it the end of the world if somehow you end up with 5 wins again or 4 wins again? No, because then you're at the top of the draft, and as long as things look better, as long as you were competitive, that's what matters. The thing that was great about the Chicago Bears, and this is going back even further too, because this was the reason why Danny Trevathan wanted to come play for the Chicago Bears. This was a while when he signed that. But last year, they were in a lot of games. They had the opportunity to win a lot of games. And that's worth noting just because of the fact that, I know, Ricky, you and I love to play the one possession game. Yes. One thing could have changed it around, and then this record's completely different. I did not want the Chicago Bears. As a fan of the Bears, I did not want them to win.
8-8, 9-7, because then you're in the middle of the first round.
I didn't want them to win very many games. I wanted them to lose games because they were not they were not a team that was ready to win yet.
See, and that's why I'm almost on the side. Of course, if I was a Bears fan, I wouldn't want to see my team lose, but would it be necessarily bad if the team goes, I'm going to throw out between 6-10, 4-12 area, and it's like, okay, we saw progression this year from this team, but we getting now another top 5, top 10 pick to get someone who can maybe help the offense, maybe help the defense in some way. And honestly, the range that I gave is what I see, because this is coming from a Bears fan or Bears shaded glasses, you're not beating the Packers at all this year. The Vikings, I'll say, like I said, you'll play us tough at home. I see the Vikings winning both games. The only teams that I could see you beating, maybe at Arizona, because I'm not really sure what we're going to get from Arizona, but I'm leaning more towards Arizona in that game at Arizona. Tampa, I think you'll beat. Every AFC East team except Tom Brady you're going to beat, so Dolphins, Jets, and Bills. And then maybe you win one game against the Lions. Like, that's your 6. If not, you're at 5, you're at 4. The one thing I think, though, is don't be surprised week 13 through 17, where it's Giants, Rams, Packers, Niners, and Vikings, that those are all L's to end the year. And it's like, well, we just got to the death lineup at the end of our season, and it was just playoff team after playoff team, and it's like, okay, we're not ready to compete with those playoff teams yet this year or in general because we're not there yet.
Yeah, I think
as a non-Bears fan, do you see them beating Seattle or no?
Seattle's interesting. I'm saying, like, it's interesting because it's in Chicago, but I'm saying no because, yeah, the defense is coming down a little bit from that LOB that we like to think. Plus
they also
Richard
don't
Sherman,
travel that well.
They don't travel that well, but in that game, I will give the nod to the better quarterback, and it's nothing against Mitch, but Russell Wilson's a better quarterback than
Mitch isn't a proven quarterback yet.
So I'm going to give it to Russell Wilson to find a way to win that game. That could be one where it's like, hey, maybe the Bears lose in Lambeau, play really good at home the next week, but it's like, wow, we lost by a touchdown, lost by a field goal, but Seattle was just able to kind of sneak out a win in Chicago week 2.
I think you kind of have, I would say, 7 or 8 fairly winnable games on the Bears' schedule. If they steal another one from the Packers maybe, or from the Vikings, maybe Kirk Cousins' transition's going to be rougher than we all think it will. You know, if they steal a couple of those games,
the Vikings is week 11, so I hope Kirk Cousins is transitioned by week 11.
Sometimes it takes a whole year. It's not the first time a quarterback has taken a whole year to transition.
If it's taken by that long, I'm hitting the panic button. I'm also hitting that a little
fully
bit.
guaranteed contract. There's no room to panic on that thing.
Well, let's test Ricky's panic.
Yeah. Right, it's Super Bowl or bust this year for me.
But at the same time, you know, they could just plain old steal it. You know, you never know what could happen.
Well, and that's why the one at home, the one in Chicago, I kind of am like, I wouldn't be surprised if the Vikings lost that game because you guys usually play up for, it's like that, like in the NBA where you get that nothing team where it's like, oh, we're going to play up to beat the Warriors today. That's what you guys get whenever we come to town, especially since the book has flipped and we've been the better team over you guys. Yeah,
I just think that there's a fair amount of winnable games here. I fully expect the floor for the Chicago Bears, I think, is probably 6. The ceiling, maybe 9 wins. And I think that's getting potentially a little optimistic about stealing a game from a team. But I think there's nothing wrong with being in the middle because right now, when you look at last year, the Chicago Bears were a bad team. They were a bad team that was competitive. And people might say that those are two separate things, but they're not. A bad team can be competitive. You don't have to be, the 0-16 Detroit Lions
or Cleveland Browns. You can. Well,
I was actually going to say the other thing about the Cleveland Browns because they were at least competitive in a few games. There were a few games they could have won, but they had some bad things happen there and bad coaching. But anyways, you can be a bad team that was competitive. If the Chicago Bears can now move to a decent team that's competitive, that's a win. Because then next year you can be a good team that's competitive. It's just all about taking these steps and strides, and you can't expect to be the LA Rams and go from being a bad team to a competing for a Super Bowl type of team.
Is that where and Patrick, I'll ask you this, is that really where the overhyping comes from? That a lot of people, like you mentioned in your opening comments, is just like, all right, we got Matt Nagy, Mitch Trubisky's here. It's basically like when Sean McVay went to the Rams, and we're going to be just like them playoffs this year.
I think that is like my main point of concern because whenever you look at something in the media, wherever you hear people talk on Twitter, they immediately make that connection between the Rams and the Bears. And those to me are two different contexts. Sure, they've built their teams around the same way and they've had very similar circumstances, but I would not make that direct connection that just because the Bears kind of followed the Rams model, that the success is immediately going to go to the Bears. Because the Bears, to me, the Bears play in a much more competitive division right now.
Boom.
Where
Bingo.
they're at the very bottom of their division. And they have the Vikings and the Packers and the Lions, who are all really good teams. And they have more of an uphill, to me, they have more of an uphill climb than the Rams did for their season. So the direct connection, the direct parallels to me always bother me a little bit, because I just don't think that they're exactly the same, even though people often make that connection between, they're doing the same thing the Rams did, they must be better next year. So that has always concerned me about that team. And also the players that the Bears have brought in this year do have to me, they have a lot of question marks. You know, people make a big drill, for example, about Trey Burton coming over and him being that option at tight end, but he also only played, which I read, 345 snaps last year, and that included the playoffs. And to me, that's a lot of hype to put on a guy who did not play a ton last year. Now he's expected to make this big contribution, and you just handed him a 4-year, I think $32 million contract to be that guy, but he hasn't really proven it yet. So there's a lot of potential, but there's a lot of, they have to also prove it within this new system. And I think that's also part of the reason I think they're overhyped this year.
Well, and with Trey, we're going to talk about him later, because he's going to be in our, spoiler alert, he's in our top 30 for the tight end fantasy rankings. And the one thing I'm glad you brought up was the division, because that's, to me, yes, when you bring up the Rams of last year, there's a lot of parallels that you can say. New young coach like McVay coming in, who's going to spark this team and give new life to it. You've got a quarterback entering year 2 who had an old coach who was probably past his prime, Jeff Fisher, a la John Fox.
Probably past his time.
And you also have, at least John Fox wasn't doing no
7 and 9
bullshit. I was thinking it was either 7 and 9 or 8 and 8, 9 and 7 or 7 and 9 bullshit. But the thing that you mentioned that I was thinking is the division. This division that we're in, that my team's in also, Vikings got to the conference championship, added the hottest free agent quarterback this year. Super Bowl expectations. You have the Packers who, they lost a few pieces in the offense, kind of shuffled that around, but they've got depending on who you talk to, it's kind of like the LeBron James, Kevin Durant debate between Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. We've even talked about who's the number one. And really, in most minds, it's the Packers have the number 2 quarterback in the league right now. So you have that. And then the Lions are kind of, even though they're there, they're still a competitive team. Whereas the Rams last year had a Seattle team who's falling off. You have Cliff Averill this week saying that, the locker room basically pretty much turned after that Super Bowl loss, that decision to kind of throw it rather than run it in that Super Bowl against the Patriots. They're coming down. You also have the 49ers were coming up, but they weren't ready to make that leap quite like the Rams were. And then you have the Cardinals, who the Cardinals were in a state of how did you get like this? How did you get to this point? Because you think back years ago, I think it was when you guys hired John Fox, the Bears had the decision to go with Arians, who was in Arizona.
That was Mark Trestman.
That was Mark Trestman. You had the choice to do that, but you went with a Mark Trestman. I don't want to open up that can of worms of who you rather have had, but that also ended, and it basically, with the Carson Palmer injuries, kind of put the Cardinals near the bottom of that division. I know that San Fran was actually the bottom of it. They didn't get Jimmy Garoppolo until later, but the division was a lot different in the West is what I'm saying, which kind of helped the Rams kind of expedite that process for them.
And you never know, because there's a lot of question marks in the beginning in the offseason, stuff like that. The Lions have a new coach. The Vikings lost their offensive coordinator, who was a big part of making those quarterbacks very successful. Aaron Rodgers lost one of his favorite weapons. He also gained one. The Packers' defense is probably better this year. They really invested in it. Supposedly, the Lions have a great defensive mind. The Vikings got one of the best quarterbacks. So there's a lot of pluses, minuses, just like for the Bears. Still the offensive line might have a few little holes in it, but they have all these new weapons of really talented players. I mean, they arguably got the number 1 targeted wide receiver in free agency. They have a great weapon in Anthony Miller that they drafted, and kind of a lot of people were saying is a bit of a steal.
There was one commenter on our fantasy rankings last week that said, don't be surprised when he's a top 10 receiver this year.
I will be surprised, but I will be pleasantly surprised if it happens. But, it's just all these teams have good things and bad things that happen. And I think the thing about Chicago, and maybe every market is like this and we just happen to be here in Chicago, but everybody gets excited. The Bears are always a team that gets hyped up, and they typically kind of
get excited until your
down.
team starts losing regular season games.
So I kind of feel like with the Chicago Bears, just be happy with some progress. And I'm all for it. We haven't played any games yet, so my prediction's always going to be 16-0. But
Super Bowl, Super Bears.
That's right. But don't be upset if they go 7-9. That is okay.
Well, Patrick, I'll let you end the segment with just basically your final thoughts on everything, just to put a bow on it.
Well, my final thoughts, I guess, would be, yes, we made a lot of great progress in the offseason. They addressed a lot of needs. Some needs remain, but I know as an NFL team, you can't address every single need that you have in one offseason. That's just not realistic. But I also want Bears fans to be more realistic about the schedule that we have and the fact that Bears are having to learn this new offensive system. And Matt Nagy was talking earlier today that it took him about 4 or 5 years to fully implement to his system in Kansas City for all of his players. And then they started making a lot of changes to it. And the Bears are being asked to do this within months, not years. And I want the Bears fans to be very realistic about, hey, we might not be a playoff team this year, and that's okay. We might not have the expected jump that all this national media is promoting, but that is okay. If we ended up 7-9, like you said, that's okay with me. That's showing you're making progress and you are continuing to move forward after years of being a losing football team. So my final thoughts would be, we're making great progress, but don't expect playoffs this year, because I think you're going to be disappointed.
Well, and the camera shuts off, going a little bit over, but hey, we love long segments here on the Onside Kick. This is where you guys come in, though. Let us know what you think down below. Are we overhyping the Bears? Also, go check out the Outcasts. This past week, they talked with the Bears. It'll be going up this week, where they looked at the Mitch Trubisky comments. Last week, they did their game-by-game predictions for the season, so go check out that as well if you are a Chicago fan. Thank you for Patrick again for coming on the podcast. Thank you to all our patrons. If you want to be like Pat in the future, go check patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. Let's move on, though. And Mark, we're going into our fantasy rankings yet again. Another thank you to Patrick for joining us. A great Bears topic. If you're on YouTube, you got to go check it out. A great Bears topic for Pat coming in, talking if they're overhyped. But we are looking at our tight end rankings, and we're almost to the end of our fantasy football rankings. We got tight ends this week. Then we've got the illustrious kicker episode next week.
Love it.
We're only doing top 16, though, next week. I don't want to kill myself going through the top 30 kickers because, let's be honest, if you carry 2 on your roster, something is loose up here, and you're basically tinfoil hat Ricky at that point if you've got 2 kickers. But let's get into the first part of our rankings, 21 through 30. Before I throw up the graphic, I have 2 honorable mentions, Clive Walford and Luke Wilson. Cracking some of the rankings, however, did not make it to the combined 30. But here is 21 through 30. Starting off at number 30, Jake Butt of the Denver Broncos. Right above him, 29, Nick Vannett of the Seattle Seahawks. Then Adam Shaheen of the Chicago Bears. Then Rico Gathers at 27, Dallas Cowboys. Austin Hooper at 26 of the Atlanta Falcons. Then Vernon Davis at number 25 of the Washington Redskins. Vance McDonald at 24, San Francisco 49er. This name I'm going to screw up, so Mark, you're going to help me out here. Miami Dolphin tight end Mike Gesicki. Is that how you say it? Gesicki. Miami Dolphin tight end right there at number 23. Ricky Seals-Jones at 22. And then Benjamin Watson, big old Ben Watt, right there for the Saints at 21. And the guy I want to start with first, there's a few guys I want to mention here. The guy I want to start with is, I actually had this guy in the top 20 of mine. You obviously had him between 21 and 30. and that's Vernon Davis. And the thing I just want to say about Vernon Davis off the start is he going to be the main tight end in Washington? No, that's Jordan Reed. Spoiler alert, he's in our top 10 for a reason. However, the thing that I think with Vernon Davis that'll help is that he is now getting a quarterback that really likes the tight end. And this will be a big year to where if we decide Alex Smith was the tight end thing because that's all Casey had most years, besides maybe Tyreek Hill, but he was more of an offensive weapon, you could say, than a wide receiver. Or will this be the Jordan Reed and Vernon Davis show as Alex Smith links in with those tight ends in Washington, D.C.?
And it's interesting because these two do have some history together as well.
Yeah, they're both on the 49ers.
Yeah. And those were some of Vernon Davis's,
better years.
I mean, we're pretty far removed from those almost 1,000-yard seasons that he had back-to-back. Now, the thing with Vernon Davis is he's 34 years old. So does the team start to limit some of his time on the field? In 2015, he had 29 targets again in 2000. That was 1 year in 2015. Part of it with Denver, part of it with San Francisco. 2016, he was back up with Washington at 59, 69. Not as much of the, when you're that number one guy, you're going to get closer to 80, 90, 100, if not more. That's going back to some of those old San Francisco days. But, like you said, Jordan Reed's that number one option. But the thing about Jordan Reed, sometimes injury might be an issue for Jordan Reed. So maybe Vernon Davis, a guy who injury hasn't been that big of an issue for Vernon Davis, maybe that does allow him to get more targets.
And let me throw this at you. Would you be and here's the thing that you got to think about in this ranking. Basically, everyone in my mind in the top 16, like when you get to this part of the ranking, tight end, wide receiver's a little different, running back's been different. This is kind of almost like the quarterback rankings. Anyone in our top 16 is basically us saying they could be your starter, depending on how deep your league is. If you have a 16-team league or less. Anyone below 16 to me is, this is a guy you could draft, but he's your backup tight end. He's a guy that maybe you're picking to be a flex spot in some weeks. He's going to compete for that, or he's a guy that, he's got a good bye week with the guy that you picked, so I'm going to go and pick him as the backup. As a backup tight end, would you be mad fantasy with 41 receptions, PPR, non-PPR, you take that into your own case, 41 receptions, just under 550 yards, 5 touchdowns?
I'm not upset, no.
That was the last season with Alex Smith in 2012 for San Fran.
Yeah, you're definitely not going to be upset with that with a guy who is essentially your backup tight end.
And I know that he also had Colin Kaepernick a little bit in that one too. I know 49er fans are going to jump on me for that.
And the other thing with that too is with it all depends on your strategy, because you mentioned the flex position. Some people are in a league where tight ends can be flex. Yeah. Other people are in a league where, no, a flex is a wide receiver or a running back.
I only say that because I know in ours, our personal one with most of the guys from MVP, we can use the tight end as a flex.
I think it's worth it because, it gives a reason to draft another one maybe. Because otherwise, you might be the person that goes, no, I got one tight end. That's good.
That's all I need.
I'll figure something out, in week whatever.
Whenever I need the bye, basically.
Yeah, I'll figure it out then. And tight ends are a difficult one, too, because there's always going to be that guy that's going to be a surprise because maybe the first guy goes down, or maybe some of those, that offensive line is not as good as we would hope, and that way you got to get the ball out fast.
Yeah.
So some of these guys down here, these are prime people to target because of the fact that some of them might actually be top quality tight ends towards the end of the year.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't get that start right away, but then they start to produce in week 5, 6, and beyond or something like that. So you definitely get some of that. And Vernon Davis, this was a household name for fantasy football fans out there years ago, but he's still always been that solid guy. He's a guy who gets drafted, and there's no reason why he shouldn't get drafted in this one as well. I just don't know because he's not the number one target. Alex Smith is new here, so there's some getting used to some things. The team is not that amazing compared to what he's had.
Which in my head, I mean, you look at, first off, and this is the last thing I'll say before we kind of move on to the next guy, one that you wanted to talk about, the wide receivers, Doxson, Crowder, Paul Richardson, those aren't guys that scream off the page at me. Yes, they're going to get their touches and could surprise me this year, but I think this is something that Alex Smith being new, he likes that safety blanket of the tight end. Jordan Reed will be the main, but you brought up injury. Hey, what if he gets injured? Vernon Davis is then the main go-to guy. I even think as a second tight end on this depth chart, Vernon Davis is going to get his. And with Alex Smith being new, he might go more to what he's safe with, what he is comfortable with, whether it's Jordan Reed, whether it's Vernon Davis. I might be a little high on him, but I think because of that, he's a top 20 tight end.
And a lot of it's going to depend for people what they actually feel about Alex Smith. You know, Sean on
the ultimate game manager.
Yeah, doesn't like Alex Smith at all. And, you know, a lot of people out there say that Alex Smith's success is very tied to his coach. You know, Harbaugh.
Now he has Jay Gruden.
Now he's got Jay Gruden. He had Andy Reid, quarterback whisperer. So if you like Jay Gruden, if you don't like Jay Gruden, is really what's going to decide whether you like a lot of things with the Washington Redskins.
Tell me about a guy that you wanted to talk about, Austin Hooper, with the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, Austin Hooper's an interesting one because he's that kind of guy where you're going to get a little surprised by him every now and then, and he's going to give you a lot of hope.
Like when he played the Bears last year?
Oh, killed it. I mean, I can't even imagine how many people went and immediately picked this guy up. And then you have the rest of it where, like, he's a boomer bust type of tight end. And that's why I have him in this bottom section of, you know, you can try and play the matchups for him because he's on a great team. The Atlanta Falcons are a great team, but they've got so many weapons.
He is number one on the depth chart now.
Yep, he's number one on the depth chart for tight end, but there's so many weapons out there. You know, Julio, they got Calvin Ridley now. You've got an amazing running back. So there's a lot to compete with, which is good and bad because that can help things out. I mean, obviously, Julio's going to get covered. He's going to get double coverage. Calvin Ridley might actually, depending on how he pans out, he might start to demand some attention as well.
And if this, and correct me if I'm wrong, if this Sarkisian offense really starts to click here in Atlanta, everyone's going to get touches. It's not just going to be the wide receivers, Sanu, Jones, and Ridley. Hooper's going to get his also. And like the question for me and why I put Hooper around where we had him at like 25 is, are we going to see, last year he got 65 targets, only 49 receptions. Are we going to see that kind of a similar number? Are we just going to see 65 targets, just over 500 yards and 3 touchdowns, which is almost a similar stat line to, like I said, for Vernon Davis? For a backup, that's not bad. But are we going to see a little bit more, maybe a few more yards, a few more red zone targets where maybe he has 5-6 touchdowns instead of just 3?
Yeah, you certainly are going to hope so. I mean, this is a guy coming into his 3rd season, so you know, this is the time where you really start to develop, and you're not necessarily going to always be at your prime here. You know, that might be year 4, year 5, or something like that, where players really start to get the NFL. But this is a time where you should be turning it on. And you look at some of this, like, sure, he had a lot of games where he only had 2 targets. That's out there. Almost half of his games last season, he had 2 or less targets. But he also had quite a few where he had 7, 9, a lot of 6s and 5. You know, so there are there are games where he is getting to be a big part of this offense. This offense had a lot of trouble, and I think coaching is part of it for sure. But I think that you should hopefully have learned, and the team did better when he got more involved in a lot of these games.
And one thing I do like with him, and this actually, he had a 5% increase in this from rookie year to last year, but he was a guy that was catching 75% of the balls thrown to him. And I mean, for me, yeah, I know we're in backup tight end range, but for a backup, hey, if you're going to catch 75%, if you're going to catch 3 of every 4 balls that are thrown your way, I'll take you as a backup because it's one of those things where I look at it and I go, as long as you catch the ball and have that big playability. Like there was one play against the Bears last year, I want to say, where he caught it and just went right up the sideline. And I think he went all the way for a touchdown, if not in the red zone, like 5-yard line. If you have that play, all you got to do is catch the ball, and you're a threat there. So, I mean, with Hooper, he does have a ton of weapons there. Is this Sarkisian offense really going to click year 2? Those are really the questions that I have for the Falcons as total and why I have them kind of low on mine.
Yeah, and it's going to depend on a lot of that. I mean, when you're in this backup range, these guys don't get a ton of targets. They get their targets, but not a ton. So they have to be people who make the most of it. He's had plenty of games where he had a 20 or more yard reception. That's good. You hope for more of that. But now, of course, with being tight end number 1, hopefully, that should hopefully kind of, give him more opportunities.
Now, here's a guy I want to mention only because he's kind of in the similar footing as an Austin Hooper, but he is lower because he only had 15 targets last year. And that's Nick Vannett for me. Because the big thing why I put Vannett, I put him right at 28 in my rankings is, yes, he only had 15 targets last year, but with the departure to Jimmy Graham in Seattle, Vannett's going to be the guy. He's a third-year pro, going to be the guy in Seattle. Is he going to get his touches? Or should people basically like yourself, you didn't have Vannett anywhere near your top 30. Is he just you know what, don't even concern yourself with them because Seattle's a dumpster fire right now. Well, not true dumpster fire, but they're heading down. I'm not touching anyone from Seattle except Russell Wilson.
The thing about Seattle really is that you just don't necessarily know when it comes to a tight end like this. They got Jimmy Graham, and everybody expected the world out of that, and it didn't pan out quite as we would have expected and hoped. He's gone, but now they got Brandon Marshall. There's a deep threat right there. That's a guy who, if he stays healthy, he's very smart. He makes free catches, which is great for a guy like Russell Wilson who wants to throw after running around in the backfield for a long, long time because that offensive line is awful. He has to make these things happen. So I just have tons of reservations about Nick Vannett being that, 124 yards last year, 1 touchdown, 32 yards the year before that, his rookie year. Out of 19 targets total in his career.
Yep.
I'm just sitting there going, I need to see something. But he's a guy I might watch. But
last year he caught 80% of his 80% of the balls thrown to him he caught.
Yeah, which is fantastic. But if you only get 15 targets, that doesn't do much for me.
Mark's like, you should be catching 100% at that point.
Yeah. I'm a little worried about the fact that you dropped 3 balls. But anyways, no, it's just, I just don't know out of this one. Sure, there's not a lot of competition for him out there.
Well, I mean, they signed Ed Dixon, who was in Carolina last year.
Yeah.
For me, that's the only thing that's a question mark for Vannett is if he I don't want to say struggle because third-year pro, you're not expecting him to really struggle, but if he doesn't click like Seattle fans or the Seattle team expect him to, is there a possibility that Ed Dixon, new free agent who's been in the league since 2010, hey, I had, 437 yards last year, 48 targets with Cam Newton. I'm going to slide right in here and take this number 1 spot from you.
Yeah, it's certainly possible because, I think it has the potential of showing that they don't have the highest hopes for Nick Vannett. It could just be that, hey, more competition is good. We can cut people if we need to cut people. But really what you're kind of looking at is a fear that, are they not into this guy as a receiving option? Are they going to be scared of using that? And it's totally possible. I don't really expect that much out of him this coming season. Maybe pay attention to him for waiver wire, I guess, but I don't know. I just don't. There's not a clear answer for me when it comes to him for getting targets.
And Vannett, to me, he's not a guy I would draft. He's a guy that I would put on my watch. Like, if your league has the watch list, put him on your watch list, see how he does the first 3 weeks or maybe the first 2 weeks, and then make a decision of, hey, you know what? Do I pick this guy up now to basically stash him and use him? Or if it's like, you know what, 4 weeks in and he's kind of a dud, I'm going to click him off that watch list. That's kind of what it is for me. Because for tight ends, like I said, it's kind of, it's a little bit wonky as top 16 is basically, if you're in a 16-man league, those are your starters. Then basically, if I'm doing my math right, up until what it would be 32, so all of these next guys would be backups. Maybe 28's a little bit too high, but that's more for me of what I think he'll be at the end of the year.
But there's also the draft strategy of it in the eyes of if you get a solid starting tight end and everybody's drafted their backups in your, let's just say 10, 12-man league, you're number 11, maybe 10, 12 getting your backup tight end, you probably don't have a reason to draft one because there's not going to be a difference between the guy you can pick up on the waiver wire. You might be better off just drafting yet another running back.
Let me put it this way, and I know this is a running back comparison, but the thing I wouldn't want to be is how I was last year with Alvin Kamara. Almost drafted him in the late rounds of our draft, passed on him because, you know what? AP Mark Ingram at the top. If he's good, or no, I did draft him. If you know what, I'm going to stash him. Then I'm like, you know what? AP, Mark Ingram, I'm going to dish him off. I'm getting rid of Kamara. You're not going to be anything. Don't be that guy that's like, you know what? I'm not going to do, I'm high on him, but I'm going to go with a different position because it's too much of a risk. If you like the guy, go ahead and take him later on because don't be like me where I had Alvin Kamara for the first week, dropped him, or week or two, dropped him because I thought that AP and Mark Ingram were the answer, and then I should have kept Alvin Kamara because of what he turned into. Last guy I do want to mention is from that Saints team, though, Ben Watson. Is he a guy, should we expect big things from him just because he's on a team with Drew Brees?
Well, I think it can certainly help, and when he's been on the Saints before, it's kind of been a mixed bag. Here's the thing about Ben Watson, Benjamin Watson, is that he is the definition of inconsistency. He'll have a year where he gets 600. He'll have a year where he gets 200. He's a guy who
He's
drops.
coming off 2 good seasons, though.
Sure.
The last one with Drew Brees, he did have over 800 yards and was targeted 110 times.
He was. That's great. But he also drops the ball a lot.
Yeah, he did only catch 67% of those passes.
So it's one of those he's a risk. He has that boom potential. He's got that great bust potential. So it's really up to you if you trust drafting a, 37-year-old tight end who did have some good years, one good year with Drew Brees and 2 not so good years with Drew Brees. And not really injury issues. You're not super concerned about that. You miss a game or 2 every now and then, but overall, he's been okay. It's just a gamble to me, but it's the kind of thing where if you want a backup tight end and he's sitting there and it's lower in the draft, you might be able to stash a good guy.
Here's the thing, though, that you're forgetting. So you look at that 2013 through 2015, he was with New Orleans. What happened between 14 and 15 in New Orleans?
Bountygate?
No, not Bountygate. Who did they get rid of? Sent him to Seattle.
Oh, Jimmy Graham, that's right.
He became the number 1 guy. Without Jimmy Graham there, not Voltron, but taking all the receptions, that is what I'm looking like. What I see is 2, inconsistencies, you could say, but really that 13-14 was, hey, I'm behind Jimmy Graham, and Jimmy Graham's going to get more targets and more passes than I am. Whereas when he was the main guy, he only caught 67% of passes, but for my backup, getting 800 yards, 6 touchdowns, I'll take that. And I see the down in his stats from last year being a Ravens problem, not a Ben Watson problem. So for me, he's in my top 20 for tight ends. I think that Drew Brees elevates him though to that point and being a part of this Saints off. The thing is, Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers are the 2 quarterbacks I'll say this for, to where when it comes to receivers and tight ends, take their players with a grain of salt because they won't care, I got to get it to this guy. No, they're going to sling the ball all over the field. They're going to get it to the open guy. Drew Brees a little bit more than Aaron Rodgers in that sense, but that's why to me, being the main guy in New Orleans, the next tight end behind him
Kobe
is
Fleener.
Well,
Josh
Kobe
Hill.
Fleener's not there anymore.
Oh, they cut Kobe
They
Fleener?
cut Kobe Fleener. The ones they have is Garrett Griffin and then Michael Humamana. Basically, he was from New England. Got a Super Bowl with them. I'm not going to butcher his last name like I just tried. But those are their tight ends. So for me, Benjamin Watson's the guy. Like, he's going to get most of the receptions. And I mean, yeah, they have Thomas and Ginn still, but you got rid of Willie Snead. So it's another wide receiver you got rid of. And I don't think there's another wide receiver. Well, maybe Cam Meredith. Forgot that they got Cam Meredith, but how is he going to come back from that injury? Can he then be the number 3 for them with getting rid of Willie Snead? Any guys in this 21 through 30 you want to mention that we didn't really put a focus on?
Just the last thing on Benjamin Watson is if he can catch the ball, I know this is silly, John Madden-esque, but he's got to catch the ball.
Yeah.
Is really what it comes down to. He has had plenty of seasons where he's been around 50, 60%.
And last year was his highest at 77.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he is coming off his highest, but like you said, there's a lot of 60s. There's a 59 in there. His lowest was when he was with New England. And, yeah, he only played in 14 games, but he caught, 47% of passes from Tom Brady. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think of our 21 through 30. Who did we hit on? Who didn't we hit on? Who do you think we should have had in these rankings that we don't have in these rankings? That's where we kind of get that discussion in this part of our rankings. But let's move on, Mark, into the next segment. And what we're doing is 11 through 20. If you're on YouTube, make sure to check out 21 through 30 also for our fantasy football tight end rankings, getting through them. And next week's the last one. We've got our, well, not the last one. I forgot. I mentioned earlier, we don't have kickers next week. We've got defenses.
Yep.
I totally forgot about defenses.
Defenses exist.
We'll have defenses and then kickers the next week. But what we are looking at is 11 through 20 in the tight ends this time. Let's get through them. Let's kind of give you guys what they are. At number 20, the newest addition to the Indianapolis Colts. I thought he was still on the Lions. That's how irrelevant he's been in my mind, is Eric Ebron of, like I said, the Colts. Then Jared Cook, the new addition to the Oakland, soon-to-be Las Vegas Raiders. Then you have ASJ, Austin Seferian-Jenkins of the New York Jets. Then we've got our Tampa Bay debate. We've got Cameron Brate at 17, O.J. Howard at 16. We're going to get into those two in a second. Charles Clay, Buffalo Bill tight end at 15. Then at 14, George Kittle. Then Jack Doyle of those Colts at 13. Then Bengal tight end at 12, Tyler Eifert. And then at number 11, the Cleveland Brown, David Njoku. And the first one I want to mention and kind of go into is, like I said, we got to have a Tampa Bay debate because I'll be completely honest, pull the curtain back. There is a tie basically between Brate, ASJ, and then Jared Cook. And out of the three, I made my case to have Cameron Brate be the top of those three. And your concern was kind of defeats the point of a ranking then if you have O.J. Howard immediately followed by Cameron Brate. So to me, I wanted to ask you, because in your personal rankings, you had O.J. Howard ahead of Cameron Brate. I almost had them back-to-back. I had Austin Seferian-Jenkins kind of in the middle of them, but I had Brate ahead of O.J. Howard. What is going on in your mind when it comes to the Tampa Bay tight end situation?
I think for me, a lot of it is I like the O.J. Howard potential, and I really don't think that they utilized him well last year. I mean, only 39 targets. He caught.
Do you expect that to change, though?
I think it should if they're smart. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers were a team that didn't meet expectations last year. So they drafted a guy like O.J. Howard. I don't know if you know this, but it was pretty early, round one.
Oh, I know. I nailed that pick. I nailed that pick in my mock draft.
That's the thing that shocks me. And I sit there and I think to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, do you guys realize you drafted this guy in the first round? And then you're going to have instead Cameron Brate, who I believe is an undrafted free agent. Obviously, this is his fourth season now.
He's a Naperville guy.
He is, Naperville Central. But anyways, he's successful. I mean, he's getting those targets. He's getting those yards. He's getting more touchdowns. But you look at it, and it's like last year he had 77 targets compared to O.J. Howard's 39. But when it comes to touchdowns, they're basically the same. So maybe it's just the simple fact that, well, O.J. Howard's a little bit bigger. Sure. But I think they can utilize him more, and I think they can do a better job with him if they want to get that offense moving. That's the problem with Tampa Bay is they've just had trouble getting that offense to perform the way it should. Because on paper, it's a great offense.
And the thing I kind of think about when it comes to the whole Tampa Bay situation, I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I know I had both of them ranked in the top 20, but if it's me and I'm drafting, I'm avoiding both of them. And the reason why is because out of the two, like, here's what was going on in my rankings. I like O.J. Howard better than Cameron Brate, but I don't expect Tampa to have that same mindset. And the reason why I had Brate slightly ahead of O.J. Howard was I like O.J. Howard. I expect them to kind of force feed Brate as the number one guy. And the reason why I kind of think that is, hey, you kind of used O.J. Howard in a high draft pick like you said, but on the flip side, you do know that you gave Cameron Brate a 6-year deal worth $41 million.
Yeah.
Like, you give a guy, and I know that's not quarterback money, but you give a guy a $18 million guaranteed contract, $41 mil for 6 years. That is basically, hey, you know, we're locking you down. You're our main, like, you're maybe not the main guy for the long haul, but we want you here for 6 years. We want you to be a mainstay because you do part. I'm thinking it might be at best a 50-50 split, but I think it'll be more of a 60-40 split in the favor of Cameron Brate of how I think he will be used and O.J. Howard will be used. That's why for me, personally, when I get to the draft, like I said, I'll avoid both of them. And that's the reason why, because I don't want to be burned saying, I like O.J. Howard, I'm going to draft O.J. Howard. And then get burned because it's like, oh, some weeks he had good weeks, but then there's other weeks where it's like, damn that Cameron Brate, why did he have to, he had a good game this week and they went to him more, and I just want to avoid that. And that's why I wonder if, obviously these two will be drafted in leagues, either as backups or as starters. We're kind of in that range for them as they are, actually both of them are in the top 16, which would, or no, OJ's is 16, Brate is 17, so they're right on that cusp of starter to non-starter. I wonder what people are going to think, though, because I kind of feel like it's going to be that whoever you draft, if you don't handcuff them, then what are you going to do? It's like, oh, I have O.J. Howard, but, you know, some weeks he's a dud because they go to Cameron Brate more. I'm going to avoid that and not even draft either of them.
The hard thing is when you look at these two guys and you kind of start to compare some of their numbers, average yards, O.J. Howard is better.
Yep.
For long, O.J. Howard is better. Touchdowns, they're even. Targets, Cameron Brate. So it's
39 to 77.
Howard has more of that big play potential, and I kind of feel like he was getting used a little bit more and a little bit better towards the end of the season. Of course, he didn't play those last couple games, but he was starting to get used. They were starting to actually utilize this weapon that they had. The problem is just that offense completely was inconsistent. So I kind of understand what you're saying of wanting to avoid these guys.
That's another thing. This Tampa offense, I am just not really happy with them. So it's like, it's one of those where, because I'm unsure about Tampa in general, unless it's Mike Evans, I might like Mike Evans, and I think a sneaky pick of Ronald Jones might be the only guys on the Bucs I think about touching, and I know Deshaun Jackson's on that team.
Yeah.
Unfortunate. I want to ask you, though, we talk about Brate and O.J. Howard. What about other two guys that are in our top 20? Eric Ebron, I know he's a new addition to the Colts, but him and Jack Doyle, a duo, they've got a bigger gap in our top 20. They're not hugging each other right at spot to spot, but my big thing with the Colts, when it comes to all their receivers, reason why I had T.Y. kind of low, what is Andrew Luck's situation going to look like? Is he going to be healthy for week one? Is he not going to be healthy for week one? Until I know that answer for sure, I'm going to be a little bit lower on
Yeah.
Colt receivers in general.
No, and you're completely right on that, and you should be.
Well, receiver, tight end.
Yeah, you should be a little weary of any pass catcher in Indianapolis.
But I mean, Jack Doyle, 108 targets last year, 690 yards. But does Eric Ebron chip into that at all?
I would think that he should, but maybe part of it really is that they want these kind of middle options for hopefully Andrew Luck when he comes back. The offensive line still isn't amazing, so he's going to have to dump the ball off, or whatever quarterback is going to have to dump the ball off. So really it's going to come down to that mystery there. The guys in the Indianapolis Colts, for me, are kind of in that I might avoid them, but I need more information about Andrew Luck first. You know, if he starts to get into that maybe week 2, 3, 4 start time,
He makes everyone better.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, if I will be completely honest, if Andrew Luck was for sure I am starting week 1 and I will be 100%, Jack Doyle would have been 11 or 10 on my ranking. Like, he would have been right there on my ranking for 11. Or actually, you know what? Looking at my personal, he was 11. So without Andrew Luck, he's 11. If he would have been like Andrew Luck week 1, he would have been in my top 10. He would have been number 10. Just because of, all right, Andrew Luck and what he does for receivers to elevate everyone around him. He's one of those quarterbacks.
Sure, but he didn't necessarily do it with Jack Doyle before.
Well, I mean, like, that was
Jack
also...
Doyle's been on the team since 2013.
True, but we have a situation also where we were talking about, who was it that we just talked about? Ben Watson, where you got to remember, early on in Luck's career, they had Kobe Fleener.
Who never did anything.
Never did anything, but really him and Luck had that connection from Stanford, carried it into the NFL.
They really didn't.
Well,
Kobe Fleener was not good for the Colts.
I'm not saying he was good. I'm saying that Andrew Luck targeted him more than a Jack Doyle. And then I can't remember the guy last year, but they always had two guys, and Jack Doyle always seemed to be the second option. This year, it seems like Jack Doyle, Eric Ebron, maybe Jack Doyle will be that first option this time.
I think I would be scared if I'm drafting Jack Doyle, the fact that that 107 targets last year, Andrew Luck was not there. They have backup quarterbacks that are just half the time trying to throw the ball to whoever because the team is not that great. The offense isn't that good.
Could you make a case if Andrew Luck is out, his value is greater than where we have it because the quarterbacks last year seemed to like to target him and like to go and throw him passes?
You could say that, sure. I mean, the team itself still isn't that good. You know, that's the hard thing with it. Of like, sure, he's getting targeted more and he will get some yards. But I don't necessarily know that he's going to be that top level type of guy.
Because I mean, for me, the thing that also plays into it with the Colts is I don't like most of their receivers behind T.Y.
Yeah.
Like, right now, their starting two is T.Y. and Ryan Grant, which most people, when Ryan Grant got a contract this offseason before he failed his physical, were like, who? Who's Ryan Grant? Oh, Redskins? It's like, first people were like, wait, Ryan Grant? I thought it was an old running back that used to play for the Green Bay Packers. The way I see this team's 1, 2, 3 going is it could be T.Y. Hilton's my main option, and then Jack Doyle and Eric Ebron, where it's like, yeah, we've got receivers, but these tight ends, we're going to go to them as 1 and 2, or 2 and 3 over most of the receivers because they're just not, they just don't have that caliber that we want from our wide receivers.
There's a lot that needs to be figured out in Indianapolis, and that's an unfortunate thing because, I mean, that's the thing, too, where we've talked about where Andrew Luck suddenly plays week 1. This is a much different team.
Yeah.
But, you know,
he
rushing yards
makes them better.
Rushing yards, they were a below average team. Passing, they were terrible.
And that's
they didn't
another
score
thing.
any points.
They lose Frank Gore.
They gave up a lot of points.
They really don't have, to me, a running back on the roster right now that just screams like, yes, this is our main guy.
Yeah.
This is a guy I'm excited for coming into this year.
They drafted 2. So
yeah, I mean, Hines,
hopefully one of those guys can pick it up.
I'm kind of interested to see what he does, but I mean, will he be mainly a return option? And will he basically be what Josh Ferguson's been, where it's like, oh, good numbers, but you're not our starting running back?
Yeah. And that's a hard thing. They did try to address the offensive line, getting Quentin Nelson is a huge addition.
I was going to say, when you knocked the offensive line, I was like, didn't they get Quentin Nelson?
They did, but just Quentin Nelson, I mean, he's good. He's definitely good, but rookie, he's got more things to learn.
Here's one guy I'm thinking about, and I really didn't know. I didn't know if 14 was too high for him. That's where I had him. Charles Clay. And the reason why is he was on my team last year, and I really liked him when he was in. However, some of the negatives with Charles Clay. First, there's the injury, where last year he was injured for some games, so he missed out. He was actually the one player all year that I had on our DL spot. Then you look at last year. All right, cool. He had 74 targets, just over 550 yards, only 2 touchdowns, but like I said, he only played 13 games. Here's my question, though. He had those numbers with Tyrod Taylor.
A dink and dunk kind of guy.
He had those numbers with Tyrod Taylor. Will he have that same kind of numbers, if not better, with Josh Allen, with A.J. McCarron? With A.J. McCarron, I'm saying no. If A.J. McCarron is the if de facto starting quarterback, then Charles Clay falls in my personal tight end rankings. If Josh Allen's the guy, I'll leave him where he's at, but I'll still wonder if 14 is too high based on the quarterback situation in Buffalo.
Well, I think the thing that you got to remember is you had a dink and dunk quarterback. Now you got a guy who's going to throw it 80 yards. You know, you got a guy who wants to unleash the dragon. And
Rex Grossman, sexy Rexy, baby.
Exactly. You know, Charles Clay certainly last year had some great success. Now, I will say one thing when people talk about, you know, last year, 558, that's great, but one game, he got about a fifth of those yards. That game against Atlanta, he got 112 yards. A fifth is a little exaggerative, but whatever. You know, there was quite a few games where he didn't get much. He's a boom or bust type of guy. Injury is also a thing. He's only had one season where he's played 16 games. Now, you add in a quarterback that, and I know I'm harping on it a little bit, he's not going to only throw deep verticals.
But he's still a rookie.
But he's a rookie, he's going to want to do it, and he's going to throw quite a few interceptions.
It would be different if they had Josh Rosen. If they had Josh Rosen, my perspective would be different because Josh Rosen, everyone's saying coming in, most pro-ready quarterback coming out. Josh Allen was the guy that people are saying, he needs the most work. So because of that, with him being a project, how many people are going to view Charles Clay lower and kind of pass on him as that, like, and I know, like I said, top 16 is starting tight end territory. How many people go, no, I don't want him as my starting tight end?
I certainly think
because
he could
don't like the quarterback situation, whether it is A.J. McCarron who was with Cincinnati or the rookie in Josh Allen. And if it's Nathan Peterman, the whole team can just go 0-16 because he's throwing an average of 5 picks a game.
I certainly think he could fall, and that might be a good thing. You know, if you're getting towards the end.
You can get him on a discount almost.
Yeah, exactly. You can get a steal, a sleeper in that case, and that would be good for you for sure. The thing that the Buffalo Bills really need to have, just for their season in general and for fantasy football here, is they need to have turnovers limited and smart passes. Because remember, their young, nice rookie quarterback with a cannon of an arm doesn't really complete that many passes. And that typically does not lead to success in the NFL, when in college they didn't complete very many passes. So that scares me because, sure, you might get 74 targets, but, you might only catch about 30 of them because half of them were a target, technically, but it's at your feet.
Yeah.
Or it's above your head, and even at, what is he, 6'6", 6'3", Charles Clay 6'3", even so, you can't catch it. It's too high for you.
Well, and I mean, let's bring in another guy, too, with that is, this is on the other side. Charles Clay loses Tyrod Taylor. David Njoku gains Tyrod Taylor.
Which I like.
And the thing I like about Njoku is I actually just changed my personal tight end rankings and flipped Njoku and Tyler Eifert. I had Eifert at 12, Njoku at 13. Doesn't change what I said earlier on. It just breaks up a tie that we had between Njoku and Eifert. And the reason why is I started to think while we were talking about Charles Clay is that the quarterbacks. And I'm like, all right, Njoku had a pretty good season last year, 60 targets. You want some more yards. You want some more, like 4 touchdowns is good. Maybe you want +5 for this year. The good thing, though, is whether it's Tyrod Taylor or whether it's Baker Mayfield. I know Baker, his sample size is from college. Both of those quarterbacks like the tight end.
Which is great.
Like Tyrod Taylor, we're talking about, maybe the numbers for Charles Clay were what they were because of Tyrod Taylor, more of a dink and dunk kind of quarterback. And then Baker Mayfield, the only reason we were talking, like Mark Andrews is a good talent in this last draft. But the only reason why people in my mind were talking about him being a third rounder was because Baker Mayfield helped elevate his play. And that is another thing that I think that whether it's Baker, whether it's Tyrod Taylor, I think that this could be a huge jump for Njoku in this year. Yeah. And I know they have Josh Gordon. I know they just got Jarvis Landry, which is like, but guys, they've got weapons for days on the outside. Njoku is still going to get his. I think he gets a little bit more than 60 touches this year, or targets, I should say. And I think that Tyrod and Baker are the reason why, no matter who starts.
And certainly they're going to be more catchable than when Kaiser's throwing them to you, because Kaiser did not like to throw the ball to any of his receivers. But he's a guy.
Hopefully he can learn a thing under Aaron Rodgers.
Certainly we can hope. He's a guy who will get targeted quite a bit. I really like the quarterback options he has throwing in the ball, especially with potentially Tyrod Taylor. I think it'll help out a lot. He's a guy who I'm pretty high on because I think the wide receivers are going to get a lot of attention. But, well,
you can only double one of them.
Yeah, he's going to be a guy who's going to be open. And if you have a rookie, fantastic. If you have a guy who likes to dink and dunk his way up the field, the tight end's the perfect spot to do it. So I think he's going to be catching a lot of balls for sure.
And I mean, this isn't going to hurt Njoku. It's just a kind of question of Gordon and Landry are going to get theirs. Njoku's going to get his. How much of a year? I know this is a wide receiver, but this could potentially, if anything, maybe chip into Njoku a little bit. Does Corey Coleman, does he even factor this year? Because he's a guy we were really high on coming out of college. Hasn't really been what we expected, though.
No, he hasn't. But I think that certainly he can maybe get some help. Landry is that guy who I'm expecting really good things out of. Even though most people are going to talk about Gordon.
He's your number 1, Gordon's your number 2?
Yeah. Yeah, I expect a lot of good things out of Landry, and he's got that new chip on his shoulder of Miami didn't want me. Well, I'm going to show you why you should have. I'm going to show you why you should have kept me around.
I'll be honest, this is a general Cleveland thing, and we'll get more into this when we do our previews, but I am super excited. I am super excited for the Cleveland Browns this year. And I know that you're one of the people that are starting to turn on the Wolverine there in Cleveland.
I'm not starting. I turned. I turned on him.
Well, I mean, early on, before the 1-15, super excited about Hugh Jackson in Cleveland, but now 1 win in 2 years.
Yeah.
Mark has turned the page a little bit. This year is going to be...
A little bit. The book has been closed.
This, to me, is going to be the make or break year for Cleveland and Hugh Jackson because, I mean, I look at this team, and I've said it before. We just talking about the receivers. Carlos Hyde on this team, Nick Chubb on this team. You go ahead and add... I like Antonio Callaway, although he had the issues in college with discipline. I mean, even defensively, like Denzel Ward in the first round, Chad Thomas in later rounds. You get Gerald Avery. This team, don't be shocked if Cleveland wins a few games. Makes a big step and is like 5-11. I'll say that. Like 5-11 will be a really good season for Cleveland.
That would be a very good season for
Cleveland.
Because
I like maybe 3 wins, but like 5's the ceiling. I just like this team overall. And like I can't wait to see what Njoku even does in his second year with better quarterbacks than he had last year. Because last year was the weird decision of like, well, do we start Kaiser? Do we not start Kaiser? We're not going to start Kaiser. No, we are. No, we're not. It was such a, not to, be really vulgar, but it was basically a clusterfuck over there.
They completely ruined any potential of confidence he might have had.
Chicken with the head cut off, and they're not going to have that issue with either Tyrod or Baker Mayfield. Any guys in this range that we didn't touch that you want to give a little love to?
No, not necessarily. I think that people might be a little down on us for being a little low on Jared Cook.
Mm-hmm. The thing is, I don't know what to expect from that Raider team.
I don't either.
With John Gruden, I don't know what to expect. So I'm kind of underrating all the Raiders until I see what it's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the only one where people might be saying that this guy's way off.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe they'll say about everything, but yeah, Jared Cook's my guy there.
I will say,
I'm completely with you with the Raiders and with John Gruden. I just don't know what to expect out of him. I don't know if he's really adapted his game that much, if he's going to be so old school. It's tough to say.
And he brings in, especially offensively, he's bringing in Greg Olsen, who was with that Rams team last year. Marshawn Lynch,
and since we're talking about tight ends, not that Greg Olsen.
Yeah, not that Greg Olsen. We'll talk about him in a second. With the Raiders, let me see what John Gruden's going to be before I start overhyping the Oakland Raiders. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in the comment section about 11 through 20. If you have not checked out, make sure you check out our 21 through 30 as well. Let's close out this podcast, Mark, looking at the top 10 tight ends that we have for our fantasy rankings.
The average fan is recognizing these names.
Yes. Now the average fan is like, oh, I know these guys. These are the guys that I really want. These are the main, if you're looking for that first tight end off the board for you, this should be in the range of the guys you're looking at. But if you're on YouTube checking out this segment, make sure to check out 21 through 30, 11 through 20. If you're on Blog Talk Radio, thank you guys for kind of sticking on right through. If you're on iTunes, listening on podcast services around the world, thank you guys for sticking on through. But let's start with our top 10. At number 10, the Chicago Bear. I'll be honest, I'm going to want to start with him first. Trey Burton of the Chicago Bears. Then Jordan Reed of the Washington Redskins. Delaney Walker at 8 of the Tennessee Titans. Kyle Rudolph at 7 from my Minnesota Vikings. Then Evan Ingram of the New York Giants right there at number 6. Jimmy Graham, the newest addition to the Green Bay Packers at 5. Number 4, Greg Olsen, coming off an injury for the Carolina Panthers. Travis Kelce at number 3 for the Kansas City Chiefs. Zach Ertz at 2, the guy for the Philadelphia Eagles, as Brandon likes to call them, the defending Super Bowl champions. And then at number 1, there was no question if he was going to be number 1 or not. Rob Gronkowski of the New England Patriots. And the guy I want to start with first is Trey Burton. And the reason why I want to start with him, if you're listening all the way through, in the first segment, we had Pat kind of mention Trey Burton in our Bears overhype segment of this is a guy that, are we really overhyping him? He didn't really have a lot of touches last year, and now everyone's expecting him to be something special in Chicago. You had him higher than I had him right where we had him at 10. You had him at 8. What's going through your mind, Bear fan, about Trey Burton?
Well, it's similar to some of these other guys that we've talked about, where Allen Robinson commands the double team. You have Anthony Miller, maybe you got Kevin White, I don't know. But, you have these different options available. And then Trey Burton's going to be there as that underneath type of guy, or, you have a great guy in not Travis Kelce, that's where I'm going, but in Matt Nagy, where if you look at Travis Kelce, you have an idea of things they would like to do with Trey Burton on the Chicago Bears. So he's going to be a guy who's going to be available, and someone who is going to be that safety blanket that a sophomore quarterback, Mitch Trubisky, who partially is kind of still a rookie because that first season, he barely got to do anything. He played 12 games, but when he was playing in air quotes because John Fox wouldn't let him throw the ball. So he's a guy who still has things to learn, he's going to want to take advantage of this safety blanket there. But the other thing with Trey Burton that's kind of nice for the Chicago Bears, and is the reason why in my personal rankings Adam Shaheen showed up, because they're going to, I'm assuming, use a fair amount of 2 tight end sets because they have 2 good pass catching tight ends.
Shaheen's the
and
guy.
They're going to want to take advantage of both. Baby Gronk.
Yeah, Shaheen's baby Gronk. That's what I was going to ask.
Now, hasn't done very much so far for the Chicago Bears, but there's a lot of hype, a lot of potential.
Because he was
he
was a D2 prospect, right?
Shaheen
D2.
Was? Yeah.
Here's the thing that I'm thinking, and the reason why, like Trey Burton, I'm the lowest down out of the top 10 tight ends. But the reason why I had him at 10 is because Matt Nagy's your offensive coordinator, basically.
Yeah.
It's Matt Nagy's system. If there's anything we knew from Kansas City, you could say it's Alex Smith. I'm going to say it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B with the system and the quarterback. The tight end is going to be kind of featured a lot. Yeah, you have Allen Robinson. Yeah, you have Taylor Gabriel. Yeah, you have Anthony Miller, who Bears fans are really high on. Last week in our rankings for wide receiver said I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being a top 30 wide receiver, although I didn't have him in these preseason rankings. Because of that offensive system, though, I'm like, you know what? Burton deserves to be here at 10. Because if Burton can be even about 40% of what Travis Kelce is to Kansas City, you'll take that as a fantasy owner in my mind and as a Bears fan for the season. And really it depends on the growth of, like, that's the thing. Like, yeah, he's going to be featured more, but also he doesn't have that veteran quarterback as well. Like, Mitch is entering his second year. There's going to be, I expect to be, growing pains as well. And that's why I'm like, you know what? I'm going to put him at 10, being a starting guy in a Matt Nagy system. He'll be at 10, but I'd rather have put him low and be proven wrong than put him too high and be proven wrong.
Yeah, I think for sure, and there's a reason why he is, the last part of this first column. He's the biggest risk out of these guys in the top 10, but I think he's got a lot of potential to be a top quality tight end. There's so many other things around there. That's not even talking about the fact that there are 2 top quality running backs in Chicago. That defense is good, so that ball should be coming back to Chicago. There's a lot of reasons why he'll have potential. If you're worried about the touches or the yardage from the past, he was a number 2 tight end. He's getting a chance to shine now, and he will be the number 1 tight end in Chicago.
Well, and that's why the next guy will kind of jump right over to him. We'll stay with this Kansas City mindset. Is Travis Kelce is at 3 in our rankings. I have him at 2. You have him at 4. Why do you got Travis Kelce at 4 behind Gronk, Ertz, and Jimmy Graham?
Well, part of it for me is Gronkowski, there's no question. Zach Ertz for me, the number 2 behind him is now gone. So hopefully he's going to get a little bit more. Also, this MVP of Carson Wentz should hopefully be there for 16 games.
Or Super Bowl MVP Nick Foles.
Exactly. Or Super Bowl MVP Nick Foles. But during the regular season, Nick Foles, not so good. So, having Carson Wentz back should improve Zach Ertz even further. We'll talk about Jimmy Graham, but I have high hopes for him. The thing for Travis Kelce, for me, that put him down, because without a doubt, if Alex Smith was there, we are exactly on the same page for probably our top 5.
That he would be, if Alex Smith was there, he'd be number 2.
4. Yeah. That Travis Kelce would be my number 2. But Patrick Mahomes is a new guy. Sure, he played a game, and he played in the preseason. And he looked decent in the preseason, decent in the regular season game he played. But he's got a lot of things to learn. The offensive coordinator is gone. There's a new offensive coordinator in Kansas City. So there are a lot of things to learn, a lot of new things to adapt to. We don't know if Patrick Mahomes is going to be as good as people are hoping. And there were 3 big names taken in that draft: Deshaun Watson, Mitch Trubisky, Patrick Mahomes. 2 of them look like they're good so far. Will all 3 be good? Statistically, probably not.
And I keep throwing this out here since I learned it from the DP show when he was on, but Patrick Mahomes was the guy that the Saints almost traded up for. but the Chiefs just sniped him and did it first.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's how highly touted he was even coming out of college.
But as a guy you can stash behind and let learn.
Yeah.
The big question is going to be...
They have Drew Brees.
Exactly. And they had Alex Smith. The big question is going to be for Patrick Mahomes is, was 1 year enough in his development? And he's got a great advantage of having Andy Reid as a coach. That guy can coach some quarterbacks. So that's why I deducted Travis Kelce a little bit, just not because I think he's going to be bad or anything, but I just think that there's a little bit of a question mark that makes me say, maybe I go with a Jimmy Graham instead because Aaron Rodgers is his quarterback.
See, and to me, I'm on the complete other side of Travis Kelce is still the if de facto number 2 tight end in my mind when it comes to fantasy because, yes, Matt Nagy left. But when it comes to Kansas City, from hearing Nagy talk and hearing interviews, it doesn't sound like to me that, all right, Nagy was his own mind. He had his own system. Now that he's gone, we're going to get a new complete system. Basically how I feel it is, it's Andy Reid's system. I'm just bringing in my next pupil. I am bringing in my next mind that I am going to mold into this position where really the offensive concept stays the same, but it's
for the most part, you're going to get a little different variation on it.
But is Andy Reid going to be calling the plays? Is the OC of Eric Bieniemy, I think I said that right, is he going to be calling the plays?
Andy Reid typically calls plays.
Well, and so he gave it to Matt Nagy last year a little bit, so there was that too. I know they got Sammy Watkins, but I'm not expecting Sammy Watkins to be, boom, out of the gate kind of exploding. I think what it's going to be, new quarterback. You know what? I have Tyreek Hill. I've got Sammy Watkins. Sammy Watkins will take the most time to gel with Patrick Mahomes. Tyreek Hill will take the second most time. I think Travis Kelce is going to turn into a safety blanket, and he is going to, not just a safety blanket that, dink and dunk, a safety blanket of, you know what, I'm Patrick Mahomes. I can throw it down the field.
Yeah.
And I think that he's going to be the main target still, and because of that, rack up fantasy points.
I do wonder with Patrick Mahomes if he's going to be similar to what I was talking about with Josh Allen, the guy who's going to throw it down the field maybe a little too much, where he's going to choose not to go with the safety blanket and instead try and force it. Because he kind of does
I think his coaching would we say his coaching staff is better than Josh Allen, though? The Andy Reid coaching staff than the Sean McDermott staff?
That doesn't mean that in the moment he doesn't go back on instinct.
But there's that, but do you expect them to put him in situations play call wise? We're going to put you in the best situations.
I think they're going to be better in that, but play calling, there's a reason why Andy Reid gave up play calling last year.
Because he forgets the run game.
And that's his
little bugaboo.
That's his Achilles heel right there. And I'm not trying to harp on Patrick Mahomes. I'm just saying that there's a reason why Travis Kelce is 4 instead of 2. It's because he's got a quarterback with near zero experience in the NFL. So it's just one reservation for me to say, maybe Travis Kelce doesn't have a 1,000-yard season this year. Maybe instead it's an 800-yard season, which he's had about half of his career. So it was not that unrealistic to expect something like that.
And I mean, the thing that we look into here is I know that, like we said, Matt Nagy was there. And I know that in the one game, I know it's a one-game sample size.
We're kind of underestimating potential Alex Smith influence for Travis Kelce, too, of being that dink and dunk kind of guy.
Well, there's also this, and I'll say this. Out of the one game that Mahomes played, I know it was his first start, and it was a meaningless game.
Yeah.
Let's be completely honest. The Broncos weren't playing for anything, and the Chiefs were just making sure no one got hurt before the playoffs. Albert Wilson was the leading receiver. He was a wide receiver, though. 10 receptions, 147 yards. The next guy, and this is the part you can put in with the tight end, only 3 receptions, but Demetrius Harris got 73 yards on those 3 receptions. So I wonder if it's going to be, Tyreek Hill might get most of the receptions, most of the targets, but Travis Kelce has those 5 catches for 120 yards with Mahomes, where it's he's got, for PPR, Travis Kelce might be a little bit more undervalued because he's not getting as many receptions. Yeah. But in a normal league, he's getting yards for days, if not touchdowns
and
for
that's
days.
a big thing about Travis Kelce, too. He's a guy who will get double-digit targets.
Yes.
He's a guy who will get that. Now, that's with Alex Smith. What I'm saying is I don't know what Patrick Mahomes is going to be for him.
And I like that small sample size is without Travis Kelce, without Tyreek Hill, with Patrick Mahomes. So, I mean, we really got to see what it's going to be. I don't think there's any worry, though. Like, maybe a little bit for people, but I don't really worry about Travis Kelce dropping off.
I'm not calling it worry. I'm just saying he goes from second best tight end in my personal rankings to fourth best tight end.
Which you're still saying that margin is small between
that. That is a tiny margin between what is Zach Ertz, Jimmy Graham, Travis Kelce.
Well, you mentioned him. What about the guy you did have at 3, Jimmy Graham, now with the Green Bay Packers?
So Jimmy Graham is one of those interesting ones where we talked about it earlier in the podcast. The Seattle days were not what we expected. He did have that 900-plus yard season, but he also had a 500 and a 600. It's not those, 13 and 1,200 yard seasons where he said, I'm a pass catcher, not a tight end.
But now he's got a quarterback equal, if not greater, than Drew Brees.
Exactly. He's not necessarily, in the season, Drew Brees is probably going to throw for more yards, at least traditionally, than Aaron Rodgers will. But Aaron Rodgers is going to throw for days. And he's going to throw to Jimmy Graham, a 6'7" target.
He doesn't have Jordy Nelson anymore.
Nope. He's going to love having Jimmy Graham out there. I think this is a nice resurgence for Jimmy Graham. Being with Green Bay, it's unfortunate because you're a Vikings fan. I'm a Chicago Bears fan. We are not looking forward to this. But
my defense will handle it. We'll just injure Aaron Rodgers again, right?
Yeah, that's one way to do
it. I'm not promoting a bounty gate.
I was going to say, spoken like a true...
That is a joke. I do not hope that Aaron Rodgers gets injured. I'm just saying, I hate the Saints for that. That's ugh. But I mean, here's the thing I'm looking at. Like Jimmy Graham, I could see why people have him in the top 5. I have an 8 because it's the Trey Burton effect, I'm going to call it. It's the... let me see what you're going to do, because the thing with Aaron Rodgers that we've said, that I said earlier, is he's going to spread the ball around. And I know that there were some people last week that were like, what? You've got Devonta Adams in your top 10? What, are you crazy? That's also a thing. Devonta Adams is your number 1 receiver. Randall Cobb could be out of town at the end of or after the season, next offseason. Will Jimmy Graham assert himself as the 1 or 2, or will Aaron Rodgers just, hey, I'm going to spread the ball around, I'm not going to target just one guy like Jimmy Graham?
I'm fully expecting this to be Jimmy Graham for the Saints, and basically being the number 1 target for Aaron Rodgers instead of Drew Brees. That's completely what I expect. And you think about it with, sure, you're going to run into some good linebacking units with Minnesota, with Chicago, but Jimmy Graham's that guy who doesn't have to sit in the middle. He doesn't have to be a safety blanket. He can be essentially a wide receiver who happens to be a monster to cover. Jimmy Graham and Rob Gronkowski were looked at as a revolution in the NFL at one point. Now, injuries have kind of held one of them back a little bit, and Jimmy Graham's career took a little bit of a downfall before having a little bit of inconsistency. But really, for me, Jimmy Graham and Aaron Rodgers is going to be an amazing connection, and it's the kind of thing that he needs, having lost Jordy Nelson. He needs a pure weapon that he can just rely on every time.
Here's what I'm going to ask you. Here's a follow-up question, what I'm thinking about. So Joe Philbin, ex-head coach of the Miami Dolphins, was the offensive coordinator last year with the Colts. He is now the offensive coordinator with the Green Bay Packers. Here's the question I have. Because Jimmy Graham's not the only tight end on this roster, they've got Mercedes Lewis. They also have Lance Kendricks.
Yeah.
Could we see this team, because of, especially at wide receiver, to me it's Adams, Cobb, Allison, everyone else, Equanimeous, St. Brown, I expect to make a jump, and it be them 4 are the main receivers. Do we see them use all 3 of these tight ends in different variations, kind of like what Philbin did with the Colts, which, hey, I've got Jack Doyle, I've got the other tight ends as well, and I'm going to mix it up to where it's not just one tight end each and every time and the same guy in Jimmy Graham. Or do they just go, fuck it, it's Jimmy Graham, and he's going to be our main, like, he's obviously number one on the depth chart, but he's going to be our main guy, and these other two, we're just going to not get into the offense as much as some people may think.
Yeah, I personally think that when I'm looking at Jimmy Graham, and part of the reason I have him so high is I'm not looking at him as the tight end. Mm-hmm. I'm honestly thinking Jimmy Graham is their number one wide receiver, their number one pass catcher in Green Bay. I rank him above anybody else who's going to possibly touch the ball in Green Bay. And the thing to think about with Joe Philbin, when he was with the Green Bay Packers, their offense was top 10 in points scored and total yards every single year he was there. He was there for 4 years. That's a big deal. So you're going back to that 2009, 2010, 2011. You're going back to that Aaron Rodgers. Mm-hmm. That Aaron Rodgers, especially when you look at that 2011, 45 touchdowns, 4,600 yards. This is a guy who will be throwing the ball a lot. They had a better running game in 2011 than they probably have now. I'm not really sure how I feel about Green Bay's running game right now. But Jimmy Graham is something they did not have in 2011.
And I'm going to correct myself. I'm thinking 2 years ago for the Colts. So 2 years ago, they had Jack Doyle as the main guy, Dwayne Allen as the second guy, 52 receptions each. Last year, the main receiver for the tight ends was Jack Doyle, where T.Y. Hilton had 109 receptions, Jack Doyle had 108. So I'm going to kind of take that back and kind of flip it to where, if anything, maybe Devonta Adams, I don't know. Maybe it's like split up Devonta Adams 70-something, Randall Cobb, Gmo, and then Jimmy Graham at least 100 targets. Do you think he gets under over 100 targets for Jimmy Graham this year?
I say over.
Because, I mean, with Philbin last year with Jack Doyle, Jack Doyle had 108.
Yeah, I would say over 100 targets for Jimmy Graham because, once again, he's my number one receiving option that I have right now. And if you want to look at Adams, if you want to look at Cobb, I'm pulling it up right now just because I'm curious of their targets last year. I'm imagining that they were guys who were, let's see, targets 117 for Adams. Randall Cobb got himself a nice 91. So I think those guys
throw the ball.
Yep, they like to throw the ball. Those guys might come down a little bit, but Jimmy Graham, I think he's going to go back to those Saints days.
Last two guys I want to mention to close out this show is basically Kyle Rudolph, Delaney Walker. They were a tie for us at 6 and 7. We decided to put Kyle Rudolph just above Delaney Walker. Here's what I'm thinking. I'll take Kyle Rudolph. You kind of start off with Delaney Walker.
Okay.
Here's the thing with Kyle Rudolph and why I had Delaney Walker ahead of him. Delaney Walker's the main tight end in Tennessee. Marcus Mariota, Delaney Walker, we've seen that connection. It's a solid connection. Marcus Mariota really has trust in his tight end. Kyle Rudolph. Yes, Kirk Cousins comes in. Yes, Kirk Cousins did like throwing to Jordan Reed. However, this team has weapons for days. We have Stephon Diggs. We have Thielen, or as Sean likes to say, hooked on a Thielen. We also have the running backs like Dalvin Cook coming back. I wonder if Kyle Rudolph, and the reason why I have him out of my top 5 is basically, or why I have him at 9 basically, is I wonder if, yes, he'll be if you have him as your starting tight end, he'll do good things for you. But I wonder if, he's got a better quarterback, but that quarterback has so many quality weapons to use that he's not just going to single in on Kyle Rudolph every single play. So that's why I have Kyle Rudolph lower and Delaney Walker higher, because the usage might be a little bit more for a Delaney Walker with not having as many weapons in Tennessee as the Vikings have in Minnesota.
Yeah, I definitely think that Tennessee is kind of an interesting one to think about. You know, this team with Marcus Mariota, they're a better rushing team than they are a passing team in recent years, and the defense has just kind of been okay. They're a very middle-of-the-road type of team. Delaney Walker's a solid option for Marcus Mariota. He does trust him. He does rely on him. But Marcus Mariota's had some big, significant injuries in the past, and I'm concerned about whether or not that starts to slow him down. The team is not as good without him. You also have some new coaches that are going to change some things here. Hopefully for the better, because offensively they were not that well coached last year. Kyle Rudolph, to me, it really comes down to, yes, I know there's more weapons, but the fact still is going to remain for me, you have a guy who has a proven, Kirk Cousins has proven that he likes to throw two tight ends. That has to raise up Kyle Rudolph's stock.
So let me ask you this. I'm going to cut you off and ask you this. So the Titans last year out of targets, Delaney Walker led the team with 111. No one's arguing that he's going to probably be the most targeted receiver in Tennessee again. For the Vikings, I'm going to give you I'll give you three options because Jerick McKinnon's no longer there. I'll give you the four guys. You split up the targets. I'll tell you what they were last year. Adam Thielen had 142. Stephon Diggs had 95. Rudolph had 81. And then although it'll be Dalvin Cook, last year it was McKinnon, obviously. McKinnon had 81. So with those four, Cook, Thielen, Diggs, Rudolph, how would you expect the targets to be split up, knowing that's what they were last year?
Well, I think that it's I understand your question, but I don't think it's really relevant because you're looking at Case Keenum as a starting quarterback compared to Kirk Cousins.
Then how do you
you're
think
moving down the field a lot fast? Well, let me answer.
Okay.
You're moving down the field a lot faster, a lot easier because this is a guy who can sling it. Kirk Cousins,
hopefully a lot easier.
Yeah, he'll sling it where Case Keenum, I don't think he even tried to sling it. You do have Dalvin Cook who's coming back, so you have a great option running the ball, sure. But all of this is just going to open up your receiving options, obviously. So sure, Kyle Rudolph might not be getting 111 or 112, whatever it was that Delaney Walker got, but he will have great opportunities. He's going to have some very long receptions as well because, like I said, suddenly we're a team that's moving the ball forward if you're Vikings. If you are the Vikings, he's a guy who will get a lot of touchdowns as well, a lot more touchdowns than Delaney Walker is going to get. And I think that's a significant addition as well.
Then are you expecting, because different quarterbacks, last year, Case Keenum, the main guy, and it shows, I'm going to Adam Thielen. Yeah. Adam Thielen's my number one. If I need a guy, I'm going to Thielen. Do you expect that to change them with, hey, it's Kirk Cousins, to where, you know what, everyone's going to get a fair share of receptions, but you know what? Kyle Rudolph was the guy he went to more.
Yeah, I think he's going to be going to what he's comfortable with. When you're a new quarterback going to a new team, you try and find something that feels familiar, something that feels similar. And that's going to be, let me throw it to Jordan Reed, who is now Kyle Rudolph. That's going to be a thing. He's going to love having Thielen. He's going to love having Diggs. He's going to love having a quality running back in Dalvin Cook. He's going to love all of that, and he's going to spread it around a little bit more. Without a doubt, if these guys both play 16 games, Delaney Walker gets more targets. Delaney Walker probably gets more receptions than Kyle Rudolph does. I just think that Kyle Rudolph,
of the team and Marcus Mariota,
the other options there, I just think that Kyle Rudolph's going to do probably more than Delaney Walker is going to do with them.
The thing, and maybe this is just me being me, but I look at, like, I know this isn't a tight end, but it plays into Tennessee. Corey Davis. 65 targets last year.
Really kind of underperforming for us.
Do we does he
and we were excited about him.
I wonder how many targets is he going to get this year? He was a guy they took really high in that first round to be a receiver.
But new coaching staff, they might try and be like, no, we can make it work. We can correct this. We can have this happen.
And the Titans, I'm interested also to see how LaFleur brings in that kind of Ram style, or that Ram kind of thing that he did with the LA Rams last year. Any guys you think in this top 10 that we didn't mention that we should give some love to?
Only thing I want to really add, of course, Greg Olsen, I hope he comes back from injury just fine. But the thing I think is interesting with his Rob Gronkowski, because there's been a lot of just talk about him.
Trade, injury,
retirement, exactly. And now with him and Tom Brady both being like, no, we don't need to come to OTAs. I don't know. He's still my surefire number one. There's no doubt about it. If I had the opportunity to draft him, I'm thrilled about it. But just part of me sits there and just kind of wonders, because sometimes people draft Rob Gronkowski really high, and then he gets hurt. He doesn't play, and people kind of regret it. Is there a little bit of that for Gronkowski? Probably not. You're still going to be thrilled if you get him. He's still your number one. You got to go for him. But, a lot of things going on, a lot of talk with Rob Gronkowski.
Here's the thing with Rob Gronkowski for me when it comes to fantasy. It's basically for me, don't feel like I need to get Rob Gronkowski as my main tight end. If you get any of these guys in the top 10, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine with one of them. Like, I'll be happy. One guy that I was going to bring up right here at the end, as you guys are looking at our logo for sure, is that Evan Ingram. I expect an increase this year because of the Pat Shurmur kind of hire and his influence on that offense now. Plus having Saquon on that team, having a run option for once.
Wide receivers actually healthy.
Having wide receivers actually healthy as well. And I mean, he's one guy I'm really excited to see what happens in New York, because I kind of feel like he could be one of the biggest benefactors from the changes that are going on in New York. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below about all of our top tight ends, 1 through 30 for our fantasy football rankings. Also, let us know what you think about Pat's topic, coming in, talking a little Chicago Bears with us. Are we overhyping them? Maybe so, but I'll let you guys be the judge of that. Little housekeeping here at the end. Check out patreon.com/Most Valuable Podcast, especially if you want to be like Pat and join a podcast. Also, go check out our store. That link down below in the description. Get yourself an MVP t-shirt. MostValuablePodcast.com is where you catch MVP each and every day. And last but not least, make sure to go to Apple Podcasts and iTunes, give the Onside Kick a 5-star rating, and write a little review telling everyone why they should check it out. Want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. Mark and I will be back next week to go over our top defenses, all 32 defenses, more like the quarterback style, top 32 defenses in fantasy football. We will see you then, but as always, have a good day, everybody.